go ahead and get started. My name is Maggie, and I'm the Youth Services Assistant here at Napanee Public Library. And this week's Books Bites, we're going to be talking about teen and YA books. If you're familiar at all with the genre, you know that it can be a very broad topic. So we've got everything from fiction and nonfiction, historical and contemporary titles, as well as dystopian and even some like fractured history books to talk and share with you today. By day, I work in the children's department, but by night, I read all genres for all ages. So I hope you enjoy some of these titles. And as we mentioned earlier, if you see or hear any books that intrigue you today, feel free to leave us a message on Facebook, give us a call, and we'll get those items on hold for you, and you can pick them up here in the library as we're open regular service hours again, or we can even bring them out to the parking lot for you with curbside pickup. So reach out to us. We'll be happy to get the books into the hands of our favorite people here in town. Let's get started. Last year, one of the biggest books of the genre was The Hate U Give, which has also been made into a movie. In this title, it's the second one that comes from author Angie Thomas. On the Come Up takes us back to Garden Heights, where the characters from that first novel take place. Same city, whole different family, and while they could be read as separate standalone books, you could also read them in tandem together. In this book, our main character desperately wants to be a rapper, and she wants to share her world with other people through music. So if this is a title that intrigues you, On the Come Up is a great story, again, for fans of The Hate U Give, other Angie Thomas titles, as well as Jacqueline Woodson, Jason Reynolds, and some of these other great authors. So On the Come Up. Our second title today is Suggested Reading by Dave Konis. Has a great cover with some black lines. Super intriguing, right? Well, here's why. The main content in this book is about people censoring other books. So just like we love to have books for all readers, all ages, and all people on our shelves, that's not what is happening in this book. When we went back and we read Ban This Book and did that last week on Book Bites, this one is going to be a YA favorite for those who have experienced censorship or seen their favorite books be taken off the shelves for whatever reason. So this is a great book. Also makes references to other amazing titles throughout history who have found themselves on a banned or challenged list. This is Suggested Reading by Dave Konis. Robin Benway is a National Book Award finalist with her book Far from the Tree. This is a great YA book with POV or point of perspective characters. It follows three teens, and it's very, very similar to like This Is Us on NBC. So if you're a fan of that TV show, this would be a good book for you. It follows three teenagers who were either teen parents, are in the foster care system, or have been put up for adoption themselves, and then the family dynamics that each of those play in their development and as they like grow in a relationship with each other. So three different perspectives alternating chapter to chapter, and they intertwine. This is Far from the Tree, and it's by Robin Benway. I was so excited to see this book come in just this week here at the library. This is the 20th anniversary cover of If You Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson. She's one of my absolute favorite authors, writes for all ages, and I try to read every single book that she publishes. These are amazing titles. This book actually takes place in New York City pre 9/11, and it is kind of like a Romeo and Juliet retelling where they are star-crossed lovers in an academy, but because of their racial and their religious differences, they feel like their families are not going to be accepting of their romance, and in the end, fate is decided for them. This is a really, really heavy topic, but low reading level story, and unfortunately not much has changed in 20 years. So although it's an older book with a new cover, still very, very relevant. You're just going to miss the technology side of the romance in this YA book, If You Come Softly by Jacqueline Woodson. So this book, guys, Sadie, made the rounds. This is by Courtney Summers. And this is an excellent story for any of our customers who really enjoy reading, but also enjoy a good mystery and are maybe also podcast listeners. So Sadie is in multiple formats here at the library. We have here what I'm holding is obviously the paperback version. You can also get this as an ebook, an e-audiobook, and I believe we also have it as a book on CD here in the library, because this book can be read or listened to interchangeably. It's amazing. So what happens is different chapters read like interviews, or they also can read like podcasts, and then there's like a mystery element to it. So you really become invested in this story. Last week we highlighted Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So if you were a fan of that book, or if you kind of like that format where it crosses genres, is totally new, a fresh look on different books, then you're also a mystery reader, this one is going to be for you. Courtney Summers' Sadie. And again, the staff have all loved this one, so we think you'll like it too. Okay, the next highlighted book here is Chasing Helicity. It is the first book in so far a trilogy by famous meteorologist Ginger Z. She's currently, I believe, at ABC News, and this is her first book, but again, there are 3 titles so far in the Helicity series. Helicity is an interesting character, one, because most people have never heard of Helicity, which means spin, but in this title, her fascination with weather and meteorology give her some dynamics that are fun as a character. So Helicity, she's growing up, and she's younger in the first books, gets older, has some more complex teen conversations and themes in the following 2 books. This first one could definitely be read by some late middle or late elementary age kids, and they would enjoy it very, very much. But Chasing Helicity is great for themes or for kids who enjoy science and family dynamics. How are we doing so far? Can everybody hear us okay? Doing okay? Okay. This next one, I was kind of apprehensive to pick up because the cover did not pull me in, and I'll be the first to admit that I enjoy a good cover on a book. It just felt bland, but let me tell you, the story had me gripped. This is A Heart in the Body of the World by Deb Caletti, and it is not her first book. I think she's written almost 40 or so. She knows how to do character development really, really well. In this story, our main character, I can't remember her name, Annabelle, is put in a situation in the first couple of chapters where you understand she is going through a lot, but you don't know exactly what that is until you keep reading and beginning to feel and empathize with her and what is happening in this story. What she ends up doing is running, literally running from Seattle to Washington, D.C. to start being an activist towards the things that have put her on this mission. So I don't want to give any of the book away, but something has happened. She has a voice, and she uses her body to help tell that voice by making a stance, and she gets a large social media following, and her family supports her, and she runs across the country and is greeted and given stories by people all over the world who have also experienced different things like what she has, and empathize with her, and the support that she gains and the healing that takes place in this story is wonderful. This is A Heart in the Body of the World by Deb Caletti. Okay, I mentioned we're going to talk about some nonfiction as well. This was one of my favorite books that I read about a year ago. This is Period Power by Nadia Okamoto. And it is also an activism book. Because this book was so filled with information, we actually started an initiative here in our library to make sure that feminine products are available for anybody who needs them, because having feminine products should never be a hardship for anybody. This story was full of statistics, and it is cited so well. It reads like a long, thesis maybe. And it just really empowered me, and I love that I was already able to do something in my community and be a part of a bigger picture, and I think that you would enjoy it too. Period Power by Nadia Okamoto is a manifesto for the menstruational movement. Okay. Alison Gervais is previously a Wattpad-only author, but she has now written several books that have gone to publishing. This is In 27 Days, which has been optioned for, I think Netflix or Hulu. Somebody is making it into a movie. In this title, our two main characters, I feel like in the first couple of chapters, they're both alive, but then one of the characters ends up committing suicide. So it does have some hard, heavy topics included in this story. And at the funeral, our female main character realizes that their classmates are not there. There's nobody else around them that can connect these two people. And she realizes that, this student has really lived a rather solitary life, has nobody to confide in. And while she's at the funeral, death approaches her. So the unique part of this story is to have a non-living, non-animal point of view. So death takes on a human form, changes every time it comes into play with the book. So can look different, is a different gender, different age. And every time death appears and is given a voice, it takes these characters back in time 27 days to see if she can change the fate and change the outcome of this other student who ends up committing suicide. So this is In 27 Days, again, has been optioned for a film, and I believe it's in production now for something, so you might want to read it before you watch it. In 27 Days by Alison Gervais. While also talking about that author, she wrote another one of my favorite books from last year. This is The Silence Between Us. This is a book that I was able to read before it was actually published, and I helped drive home the promotional side of reading this book before it actually hit the shelves. This was a very, very unique book for me because I have lost some of my hearing. And this book also has a character who is hard of hearing. She takes a large move with her family, and she is taken from an all-deaf school where all of her teachers and all of her other students around her all speak American Sign Language, and she moves across the country because her sibling is also sick so that they can be closer to that hospital, and she's thrust into her first mainstream school where not everybody can speak American Sign Language and are not as careful about lip reading and things like that. A Silence Between Us is told in kind of a really unique format where if you look super close to the words, if things are in all capital letters and it almost looks like screaming in text font, it's actually what is being signed. And when you use American Sign Language, a lot of the words that are communicated across, you leave out a lot of the small words, and it's all very direct and to the point. And the way that the book is written is exactly how it would be interpreted in American Sign Language. So a very unique way of storytelling, hit close to home for me, and was super, super one of my favorites of the year. This is The Silence Between Us by Alison Gervais. Again, she is the author we mentioned in 27 Days as well. Previously just a Wattpad author, but is now also in print format. We Walked the Sky is a book that I came across last year by Lisa Felder. This book is a dual perspective 50 years apart. So I like to call these time slip. What it is a great-grandmother and a granddaughter who are both tightrope walkers in the circus. And these books, each storyline is what drove the great-grandmother who in her, teen years left home, joined the circus to get away from her family circumstances, and then on the alternating chapters 50 years later when her great-granddaughter is trying to leave the circus and to leave that life behind her. So the interwoven storyline is super compelling and something that I don't usually see in YA teen books. So you get both perspectives alternating back and forth, and it makes some great conversation topics and a good reminder that you can't always run away from where you began. The Christy Miller collection is currently housed in our religious fiction section, But as many of the readers know, Christy Miller actually is 15, turning 16 years old in the first 12 books that take place in her high school years. Robin Jones Gunn feels like a friend. I have devoured all of the books that she has written, and although these characters have been written for 30 years, they don't age quite as quickly in her books. So if you're a fan of Karen Kingsbury and how her characters can jump different genres, and you hear and you learn and you develop those characters over and over again, this might be a new series for you that does transition over into our adult collection, but definitely the first 12 books and some of the other series could be read as YA books. That's why we're including it in this week's Book Bites. Christy Miller has 12 high school years, and then there are also some college books as well. So we'd love to get you started on this series, see if it's a good fit for you. Francesca Zappia is a Hoosier author. She's got Hoosier ties and has been up for the Elliot Rosewater list. Eliza and Her Monsters is just one of several books that she has written. This one is a good book for anybody who is enjoying like webcomics, writing books on their own, or publishing books online, kind of like Wattpad and different things. In this story, our two main protagonists is a total outcast in town. When she's in school, she's not really liked. Nobody really pays attention to her, but online she has a massive following of more than 1 million people who follow along with what she is doing in the world that she is building in online with her drawings and her stories. And a new student arrives at her school, and just by chance she finds out that this student is actually one of the biggest fans of her webcomics and has also written webcomics that are like fan art or fan fiction of her work. And they develop a relationship, but she is not forthcoming with who she is online. And so it plays a factor in what happens in this story. So I hope that you would try to read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia and kind of get a taste of what fan fiction and webcomics is all about. And this would be an alternating back and forth between a fantasy world and what is happening in the stories that she is writing and what is happening day to day in her life at school. Okay, another book that's going to take place in high school, where there's different people that come together and they develop a relationship. This is Eleanor Park by Rainbow Rowell, another author that I find that I try to read everything that she writes. And Eleanor Park has come up for multiple awards and different things because of the content inside. YA fiction often has content-heavy, hard topics, and by putting books together that can bring conversations to light, we are able to develop and have hard conversations that we might not be able to bring up otherwise. Teens are just that. They are young adults developing themselves that are not immune to what is happening around them in current events and how it affects their lives. And that is exactly what happens in Eleanor Park. They come together through similar situations and similar family dynamics, but also very differing family dynamics. And it is not a happy ending in this story. But you know what? When in real life does things get wrapped up in a cute little bow. So if you need a very thought-provoking story that gets you thinking and gets you in somebody else's shoes, Eleanor Park might be for you. This is by Rainbow Rowell. Our next story is by Kira Cass. This series, the selection, is actually one that I have read through twice over, and I am super excited because Netflix has now optioned it for, I believe, a mini-series. So in this story, America's Nation, she is living in the future. So what has happened, this is a dystopian book, so future world building, things have changed. It takes place after the Fourth World War, when the United States is in so much debt that China actually owns it and puts a monarchy back into into what is currently America. And in that monarchy, there's a caste system where people are supposed to marry other people, and it's almost a mix between like The Bachelor and Divergent. So if you're familiar with the caste series and the world building of Divergent, it's very similar to that, only all these different future queens are put into the castle, if you will, and the prince is trying to win over who is going to marry him and lead this country. So it is, it's a love story, it's a series, it's world building, and there's also some like censorship and unfair governing. Great story. It has a beautiful woman on the cover, but it really is for boys and girls, and the storyline is just amazing. So another series that you might want to try to read before you watch it.
And that's actually number 3 on the top most checked out books for teen.
Here at our library?
Yeah.
Wow, so the fact that we have it here, we can get that into your hands.
I don't think it's the first one. It's The Elite, which is the second.
The second book in the series.
Yeah, so the second book in the series is the 3rd most checked out teen book.
Oh, that's so cool. Very, very cool. Any of these titles that we're talking about today, if you leave us a comment on Facebook Live here, on our social media pages, or give us a call, we will get them on hold for you, and we can either hand them to you when you walk in the building, or we could even bring them out to the parking lot. So don't hesitate to send us a message, and we will get these into your hands. There's just a few more books that I'd like to highlight for you. This is Gary D. Schmidt's Orbiting Jupiter. This is a very, very quick read. You could read it in one sitting. Lots of dialogue heavy, and this would be a great book to have conversation with if you have or know anybody that's in the foster care system. This book follows a family with just a single child, and they take in a foster teen and the dynamics of what that looks like, and building trust, getting to know somebody who you haven't known your entire life, and their backstory, and what and when worlds collide, what happens. In this story, Gary D. Schmidt is actually a professor, so he writes really, really well. His characters are developed with like a gripping empathy. You feel like you're in their shoes. And this story, it comes full circle. So it's, I don't want to give too much of it away, but you can be bawling your eyes out, and then you sigh with gratification as you keep reading, because you just feel the whole spectrum of emotions with Orbiting Jupiter. This is another book that I've actually read 2 times and have had great conversations and dialogue with because of it. I would love to have this next title actually be something of a fantasy history. Monica Hesse does a great job of bringing history to life. She's written several books. The Girl in the Blue Coat is probably her most famous book, but The War Outside actually takes place in Texas, and I don't have any recollection of learning about domestic internment camps during World War II. I don't remember ever learning that as a student in school, and maybe I had, and I just kind of forgot about those things, that an ocean did not separate us from that war. There were huge camps set up, and the one that this one takes place in, it's like 1940s, and they're in Texas. I think it's 1940s. And they're in Crystal City, Texas, which is actually a town that was built for people who were believed to be empathizers of the war. And they are put into it's a whole town that they built. It has its own school, it has its own stores, it has, it's just a giant jail. And whole families were moved to these internment camps, maybe because just the dad or just the mom had an old coworker or a cousin or somebody who might have had something to do with the war. If there was any chance that they were passing along information. These whole families were relocated to Crystal Springs, and this is where the setting is of our story. So it's the war outside. So this entire community is a giant penitentiary where everything is controlled for them, and it is about two girls, and they are considered like opposites, and they gain empathy and they develop a friendship towards one another where they might not have met otherwise. So it's a great story. I just wish that I had known about it, but more so that this part of our history never actually existed. So this is A War Outside by Monica Hesse. Okay, two more titles I'd like to share with you today. All the Bright Places was recently released on Netflix, I believe, as a movie. So this is the book that it was based on. This is Finch and Violet's love story. It does not have a great ending, but it has some great merits in that it can build some conversation and dialogue towards feelings of not belonging or not being the person that people think you are. This story brings two characters together, and it pulls them apart. It's not a happy ending, but if you enjoyed the movie and you want to read the book definitely has a lot more content than what is included in the movie itself. Or if you've never watched it, maybe give the book a try first. This is All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. And this book also takes place in Indiana, so if you're part of our Expand Your Horizons book club, you might have come across this title as an Indiana settings book, and you actually get to travel around with Finch and Violet and visit lots of low-key tourist attractions here in Indiana. Oftentimes I'm asked, what do you have on your shelves in fiction for teens that's gonna kind of feel like 5 Feet Apart, that's gonna feel like, what's the star book? John Green.
The Fault in Our Stars.
The Fault in Our Stars. Wow, I cannot believe I did not remember that for a second. Thank you, Michaela. So this would kind of be along the same storylines. Zach and Mia are actually two teens. They both have cancer, and they meet in a cancer ward at a hospital. One has a great family support, friends support, and the other checked herself into the hospital. Her mom is kind of MIA, can't come to grips with her daughter's cancer diagnosis, and she's very much on her own. So she uses an outlet like social media to help keep people in the know about what's happening with her. I personally enjoyed Zach and Mia even more than The Fault in Our Stars, even The Fault in Our Stars and 5 Feet Apart. So this is a great story. If you enjoyed those, I personally enjoyed this one even more, and definitely brings characters to light. Not all of us are healthy, functioning people, and that includes Zach and Mia. This is by A.J. Betts. So these are the titles that I have for you today on Book Bites with Maggie. I hope you're able to join me next week. We're going to be highlighting a lot more nonfiction titles here in our Napanee Public Library collection. If you are viewing this from farther away, I hope your library is able to fill in any requests that you would like. But if you're a local, we'd love to get these into your hands. Please give us a call, message us on social media, or send us an email, and we can get these books into your hands. You can kind of experience them yourselves and share your love for books just like we're doing today. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.